Hello and welcome to episode 305 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now joining me on today's episode is the film director Stephen Kijak. He's known for making a variety of films and documentaries such as Scott Walker, 30th Century Man, Stones in Exile, We Are X, If I Leave Tomorrow, Sid Judy, and what we focus on purely today is Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed. This is a great documentary and is just literally, as we're listening here right now, has been released for you to rent on digital platforms. So please, if you've enjoyed today's episode afterwards, go and check it out and I promise you'll absolutely love it. It's an amazing documentary all about Rock Hudson and his life, and I won't spoil it, but it's just very moving and will make you very emotional, but in a great way. It's brilliant. And the chat that I have today is absolutely awesome with Stephen, and that'll be coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. But before I get there, let's talk about episode 304. I was joined by, oh my god, this was such a hell of an interview for me, the absolutely amazing Andy Hull from one of the best bands in the world, Manchester Orchestra. One of my most downloaded episodes this year. Also, this is available on my YouTube channel as a video because many people have been harassing me for a long time now saying, please get these interviews out there on video. I don't have time to listen. I want to sit and watch them at home instead. And do you know what? I've done that and it's been an amazing success already. So if you want to go and check that out on YouTube, it's literally Mark and Me. And on there, you can subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up and just leave a comment. It really means the world. But today, it's all about Stephen. An amazing film director, an amazing documentary maker, and I can't wait to share this with you. So here's me and Stephen talking all things film. So Stephen, thank you for taking the time to join me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
Of course, my pleasure.
What I love to do, Stephen, with every guest that's been on, I've just done over 300 episodes now. Actors, directors, film stars, producers, bands, songwriters, literally anyone from all walks of life get the same first question. What I'd love to know is, when you were a kid growing up, what was those first memories of film that you have? Maybe you were at the cinema or someone in your family gave you a VHS or something, but that first film that you watched that made you fall in love with film.
That's a very very difficult question. I mean, the first memories of film and then the first real love affair with film, I think, are maybe two different things. Honest to God, the one that sticks with me the most, I don't know if you had this, well, of course you must have had this film. Escape from Witch Mountain was a big favorite of ours. I think the budding goth in me really enjoyed the, kiddie horror type movies. I wasn't much for the corny side of cinema. I know I was dragged to see Herbie the Love Bug when it came out. But I think Escape from Witch Mountain, something about that has haunted me my entire life.
It's still stuck with you today.
Yeah, it really has. It actually popped up on TV not that long ago, and I couldn't believe it. We watched the whole thing, and it was the strangest experience. You see things sometimes that you haven't seen in a while, but I mean, since I was 6, you know what I mean? It was really extraordinary.
I don't know if at this point I admit to you, I've not seen that film.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Run, don't walk.
It looks, I've just Googled it now, from the late 70s. It looks like a film I want to watch right away.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I think there's been sequels and remakes. And
yeah.
It's just I think a lot of people of a certain age were hypnotized by that film in some way before they understood what they were watching or why they were watching it. You know what I mean?
See, now I'm really intrigued and I really want to check it out. So after seeing this real movie experience that kind of warped you and kept with you for many, many years, were there certain films that you started to notice, or a genre that you were really enjoying as a kid or as a teenager, that made you then think, do you know what, I'd like to actually be involved in the production of a film?
Well, that didn't come until much later, honestly. I mean, growing up, suburban, small town America, not a lot of access to stuff. I mean, yeah, we eventually had a big blockbuster video in town, but I mean, the two movies that just were the anchors of my childhood, I think post Witch Mountain would have been like Grease and Xanadu. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Honest to God, like these weird musical fantasias. I mean, we watched Grease every weekend. Every single weekend. We couldn't get enough of Grease. Um, Xanadu to a lesser degree, and then I strapped on some roller skates and would roller skate around the neighborhood. And I'm sure in my head, I thought I was Olivia Newton-John and I was ready to take off like one of those crazy muses. I mean, it was, I mean, you're a kid. These things like you don't know what a good movie or a bad movie is. It's just, it's sound and vision and it just takes you away. I mean, from there, I think the first real serious quote movie bug came in high school when our attentions shifted to Liquid Sky, the really whacked out cult New York new wave movie.
Yeah.
That just, I mean, that replaced Grease in our maturing minds, and that became the weekend kink. You know what I mean? And we taped the soundtrack off the TV and would do routines to me and my rhythm box. Yeah, I mean, you can see a pattern developing. Because I end up doing music based movies mostly, and really after the early exposure to these films, I really just wanted to be in bands and do music. Movies, a film didn't really kind of grab me as a thing to do until I was really in college.
So while you're at college and you wanted to then go down that road of filmmaking, and obviously you've been making films now for over 25 years, did you have the full support from your family? Where you said you were from, I suppose it'd be a bit different to announce to your parents that you suddenly want to go and start making films and become a filmmaker, or were they very supportive from the start?
Very supportive. I mean, I was an artsy kid growing up anyway. My mother was a community theater mom, you know what I mean? So I grew up with musicals and theater and that kind of stuff in the house. They were into it. I mean, they loved it. Like they just were super supportive. I mean, I was in the marching band in high school and I was editor of the newspaper and I was always writing and doing musical stuff. So it just sort of was a natural. My mother's older sister is or had been a famous ballet dancer, um, and her younger sister, while not in the arts, was at Woodstock in '69. So
That's very
there was
cool.
a bit of that. My grandfather was a painter, so all of this was a real natural progression. There was no resistance. They bought me guitars. They bought me a drum set. Why, I don't know what parent would willingly buy their kid a drum set, but they supported every whim. It was kind of great.
That is
I
amazing.
wish they had made me stick with the guitar lessons, but other than that, no complaints.
As a kid, we want to give up straight away. I started playing piano at the age of like 9, and I rebelled. I was like, I'm not doing it. And I got to like grade 6. I was doing really well, but I was just like, I'm not. I was like, I'm not doing it. You're making me do it.
Yeah, should
I
have
regret
stuck
that
with
now.
it.
So when it goes down to the world of obviously documentary making, were there certain ones that you watched as a teenager or young adult that made you then get really interested in the art of making a good documentary? Because there is filmmaking, and obviously that requires a lot of skill. But with documentary making, especially a lot of documentary makers I speak to, the amount of editing, the amount of research, the amount of access that you need, it is on a whole other level, isn't it?
It is. And it all happened to me by complete accident. I mean, when I really got focused on making films and I was in college, I mean, we were in the heyday of like a second, like another, like kind of auteurist wave, if you will. I kind of hate the concept, but it was Almodovar, it was Adam Agoyan, I mean, Lynch and John Waters were there at the foundation. I studied with the man Ray Carney at Boston University, who wrote the book on John Cassavetes, literally had all of John's 16 millimeter prints
Wow.
before some of them were even on video. So like we were seeing these things early on, and it was that really took a hold. The Wim Wenders, I remember, I had a terrible breakup and I went immediately to the Brattle Cinema in Cambridge and saw a double bill of Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown and Wings of Desire. I mean, those were the things that were sort of shaping my sensibilities. And the first thing I did was a scripted film that was a complete and utter disaster. Despite still being available for people to watch, unfortunately. And documentary was a complete and total accident. But luckily, I was living in New York and had been able to see, either things that I had rented or just great revivals of some of the greats, like Grey Gardens, obviously one of the greats of all time, and that kind of gave us a foothold for the first documentary I ended up doing, which is called Cinemania, which was about manic obsessive film buffs in New York City. And I had gone to a screening of Grey Gardens where Al was there just to kind of corner him and say, "How did you do it?" I'm embarking on a film about completely unhinged people in New York who live in this subculture of cinephilia. And he just said, "You just have to love them while the camera's rolling."
That's good advice.
With those big bushy eyebrows of his
Yeah.
and his glasses. And so yeah, it was sort of, those films, him and Pennebaker's, it sounds cliched, but those were the two poles. When you started getting into serious documentary filmmaking, it's Gimme Shelter and it's Grey Gardens are the two kind of great foundational inspirations.
And I know that you worked on a documentary only a couple of years ago on the Smiths. Is that correct?
That was a feature film.
Yeah.
That was an excursion back into scripted filmmaking. Nothing to do with the band itself, other than their breakup is the catalyst for the
So what was
narrative.
it? What was it that made you then go back into the art of filmmaking instead of documentary? Was it just the opportunity came and it
Oh,
felt too
I
good?
wanted to do it for years. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always written scripts and I've always entertained, scripted narratives. And to me, that was, a nice bridge back through music, which had become my pocket for a while. And that was my child. It was like it was my story finally. I mean, after a point, honestly, the documentaries are work for hire. They're jobs. You make them passion projects, but your stories kind of, or my stories got kind of shunted aside, and you're at the service of you're making other people's dreams come true, essentially is what it is. And I mean, we do it with the utmost professionalism and attention, but there is a point when you're like, but me, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I have a narrative thread to unleash and unfold, and I want to start getting to it. So, yeah, it was just a script I had that I developed, and unlike a lot of the docs, this one took 10 years to get off the ground, and you know, it was a very difficult, painful process,
I
but we
mean,
did it.
you've covered many bands during your career: David Bowie, Scott Walker, Rolling Stones, Backstreet Boys. So many different arts, so many different bands, so many different groups, and so many different genres. But is there still a dream list of someone that you'd love to do a documentary on that if you had the opportunity and it didn't take 10 years to get greenlit, you just snap someone's hand off straight away?
Hmm. I get asked that a lot. I don't know. I mean, there's so many. It's a hard one because it's a be careful what you wish for sometimes with some of these ones. But I still think there's 20 documentaries you can make about Bowie. I think you could endlessly make films about Prince. Um, Kate Bush is a delicious enigma. I'd love to attack one day. If Susie Sue would ever, come, answer our emails, I'd love to indulge my gothic sensibilities and do a film about the goddess. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's one of those things where like when you see it. I almost just put the antenna up and see what comes our way. Um, and I and yeah, it's been a really surprising and interesting trip.
And at the moment, obviously, you're promoting Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed. Now, with this documentary, how was it that it came about and was brought to you?
Producers that I work with quite frequently developed it, and again brought it to me out of the blue, and asked me if it would be of interest, and it was of great interest indeed. It was nice to just take a little break from the music stuff, and to do something that had more of a social point to it. I had done a series for HBO Max called Equal, which was
Yeah.
all about the LGBTQ rights struggles in the years, leading up to Stonewall. And we were able to do it with a really cool, unique sort of hybrid sensibility. And it, I thought it was great. We loved it. It had a great experience, and it was felt good to finally be, exploring queer narratives and doing something that you thought actually could move a conversation a little bit in the world. So this similarly fit right into that kind of project, just given the state of the world and the the kind of increasing anti-gay trends, everything, legislation, violence, all of it. We're in a very difficult spot again, and it's never a bad time to tell stories of our gay elders with a decidedly queer point of view. That was it. I really wanted to, really get in there and tell the inside story.
I always find it fascinating when a documentary maker produces their final work and it's like the final edit, and they're happy then to hit that, publish button and it be the final mix down. How, when you're tackling a topic for someone like Rock Hudson, who has so many years of footage and so much, how do you even start to kind of whittle that down to a realistic time frame for a documentary? Because you must have had to leave so much stuff on the director's floor and the editing floor.
Always, every film is like that,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
must be so tough.
Well, it's the job, and again, it's not like this decades long passion project. You're beholden to your budget, your schedule,
Yeah.
and you've got producers cracking you the whip, and you're staring down a deadline. So it's just experience and time management. Honestly, good outlines, great editor, uh, and off you go. I mean, it was, to me, it was very fast because it was such a vast amount of material. Um, I felt terribly rushed, and in just completely unsure if we had landed it and if we really had a film. And our final our final mix, watch back with the producer. She was in tears when the lights came up. So she's like, "I think it's your best movie." I went, "Oh, well, then I think we did it." So yeah, sometimes they just get away from you. You have no idea what you're actually doing, but you start to develop the instincts to shape it. Yeah, this one, there were so many little paths and detours that I wanted to go down, and they're never finished. That's the thing; they're never actually finished for me. Um, but it's a Rock Hudson story, not the Rock Hudson story. There's
Yeah.
books, and there's a lot more research you can do, and so yeah. But it's yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's also interesting not having music to rely on to shape your emotional arcs. That was probably the biggest challenge for us. Because the editor I work with, we've done a number of the music films together, and you find that's you're like, oh wow, we've had this enormous crutch to guide emotion and to push story. It's the songs, it's the artist's songs, and we really didn't have that. So that was tough.
I had Alex Winter on only a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about documentary making in quite great detail. And he did a documentary on Frank Zappa, and he had the whole
Yes, he did.
access from his family, and he had the archives and got some real exclusive footage. And every day he was learning new stuff. Was there something that you weren't prepared for with Rock Hudson, that once you had this access and once you were going through this stuff, really opened your eyes, or told you a different story in your head, or gave you a different kind of impression from making the documentary?
Not really. I mean, because I didn't really have much of an impression. He
No.
wasn't somebody that I held on to as like a dream subject, or, I was more interested in Douglas Sirk than I was in Rock Hudson. I
Yeah.
was more interested in the directors he worked with. Um, but we were very lucky to work with Mark Griffin, the author of the big juicy biography. All not juicy, it's just rich. All that heaven allowed, and yeah, it really gave us a good framework to work in. Um, and yeah, I guess the biggest thing, it was more of a disappointment that Rock Hudson is the worst interview in Hollywood. I mean, it's from the 50s, they even write about how hard it is to interview him. And that's, oh, the big secret revealed would be on these these magazines from the 50s. And you're like, oh, what's the secret? And it's like he's the worst interview in town. Like he gives nothing away. He almost doesn't know how to explain himself. The publicist has to whisper in his ear. And then as the years go by and the more you collect from him to try to get him to tell his own story, you find that, oh God, it's impossible. He doesn't tell you anything. Even like you're not expecting him to come out and like reveal himself. Is this just there's just nothing there at all. It's very weird. He's very flat, he's very dry, he talks very mechanically about films and not often with a lot of enthusiasm. So you're kind of screwed. You have to find new ways in to figure him out.
So that must be a real
And
challenge because all the footage you're watching, you just be like, oh, come on, just tell me more, give me something.
something in there. Even to, I mean, the most revealing one we ended up not using because we couldn't contextualize this very weird interview from I believe it's even the early 80s in Spain. And it's like, wow, what's he doing there? And they ask him if he would want to go out to the dances or something with, would you take Bo Derek or Richard Gere? And he's like, oh, I'll take Richard Gere. And he kind of laughs it off. But we thought, oh my God, it's like, has he actually finally admitted that he wants to go out with dudes? Or was this just him joking around? Um, but it was a very odd interview, and I don't know why. Again, it ended up not being used for some bizarre reason. But yeah, it was a very strange journey with him, which is why we ended up leaning so heavily on the clips
Yeah.
and just continuing to repurpose and use them and rely on people that knew him to kind of make it more personal.
I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of this so I could obviously see it before today's interview. And I'm not just saying this. Me and my wife spend almost every single night watching documentaries just on Netflix, just sit there, what should we watch tonight? Oh, I don't know what to watch. Let's put this on. And I'll watch everything from crime to real life drama, all these different ones. And I'm not just saying this. Your documentary was absolutely beautiful. It was so well constructed. It was so well
Thank
put
you.
together. And yeah, at the end, I was almost in tears. I was just like, yeah, I was very emotional, and I think you should be really, really proud if you don't feel like you were given enough time to get it to where you wanted it, or the edit wasn't quite as long as you had hoped. You worked miracles because it was absolutely unbelievable.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear. Yeah, no, it's really down to great collaboration, and Claire Didier and I have done. That's my editor. I have done a number of things together now, and you know, we're I'm completely lost without her. She's one of the best. Very musical, very lyrical, very sensitive, and yeah, just we just get each other and are able to understand duration and time and shape things with, she's very good at pulling out the emotional rhythms of things. Uh, yeah, we just have a lot of fun doing it too. But yeah, thank you. Thanks. It's good to hear. I mean, we
That
ultimately wanted it to be an emotional journey. If some of the
yeah.
facts and figures are left out, or we've missed 4 or 500 boyfriends, so what? Say la vie. We got the important ones in there.
What I'd like to ask as well is I have a lot of filmmakers and students and people going into film school listening to these podcasts. That's why I've got a lot of directors and actors on here. What advice do you give to someone right now trying to get into the industry? Because everybody's got a camera, everyone's got an iPhone, everyone can be a filmmaker. But what do you think it needs in the world today to kind of stand above the rest or to at least be seen for the work you're doing?
That is a really, really hard question because the answer to that seems to change daily at this
Hourly.
point. Things
Yeah.
are, yeah, things are in such a weird flux. I mean, in general, I always tell people to just build community and find collaborators that you trust and to grow together. I mean, if you look at my body of work, I mean, I've worked with maybe two, three producers over, 13 projects, lots of repeat business. You know what I mean? We just kind of stick together. You find teams that just work, and it really is about relationships with producers, the most, I would say, on the doc side, definitely, except for maybe one experience. They're good friends to this day. I mean, they're drinking buddies, they're confidants, and we're great collaborators. And obviously, editorial. Your editor is your best friend. I mean, I know how to cut. I learned to cut on film. Actually, I'm of that generation. I cut on an old 16 millimeter flatbed Steenbeck, and but I'm not as skilled with an Avid. So, I know it. I know the vibe and I know the actual, like, editing is in my DNA. It's very important, but like to have that relationship is so crucial. And I don't know, as far as storytelling, I'm a member of the Academy and I see all the documentaries that are vying for the big award. And I just think the ones that break through for me, I mean, it might not even be the ones that get across the finish line. It's just it's just an authenticity of voice. You can tell when a director is committed to the subject. And I don't know how else to put it. It's almost like inarticulable in a way. It's so hard to give advice because my journey has been so slow, and it's been a slow burn in a way, and part of it's just being completely pigheaded and not giving up. I could have chucked it a lot along the way, but there comes a point and I don't have an option. What else am I going to do now? So it's like, there's just a determination to stick with a subject and a story, but to do it with a great team of collaborators is essential.
Amazing. And my final question for you today is I ask this to everyone that comes on, but what I try and do to make the podcast as original as I can is whoever's been interviewed gets to choose the final song that's played at the end of the episode. So once this is all edited and ready for the world to listen to, you can choose any song by any band or any musician or any piece of music that means something to you. Now, I know as a huge fan of music, there might be a million songs in your head right now, but try and think of the one that comes to your heart and soul before any other. And if there's a reason why you love this piece of music, that's almost as interesting as the song itself for me.
Well, it's always going to be my favorite, my hero, my number one. It's going to be Scott Walker,
Yeah,
and it's going to be The Old Man's Back Again, just because it's the best bass line ever laid down to vinyl, and the voice and all of it. That's what I think more than anything, more than any director, he set a bar as a creative person for me in making that film, which was my first like music film, was one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. And yeah, he's always there. Just kind of, I mean, I can't imagine what he thought when I made a film about the Backstreet Boys. I was so embarrassed. But he set a bar which you can never reach, but he's a guiding light.
that sounds incredible.
And
Thank
it's
you
a
so
jam.
much.
It's one of the best.
Yes, what I'll do now is usually I spend a few hours editing and then I always get excited by putting the last piece of music on. And then because I've not heard much of this, I'll then spend the whole week going down this whole like rabbit hole and just listening solidly to someone new. And this is great for me because it just means I'll be really, really enjoying the fact that I can go out there and just, yeah, just absolutely unbelievable.
Good stuff. Thanks for the chat.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Stephen. What an amazing guy, what a lovely, humble guy, and has some amazing work. Go and check out all of his work. I urge you all to do it right away. He's such an amazing mastermind of filmmaking and has such an art to his craft. And Rock Hudson, All That Heaven Allowed, is literally out now. So go and download it or rent it on a digital platform and then let me know what you think, because I absolutely love that. That's the best compliment a podcast can get, is if someone goes and checks out a book, an album, a film, a documentary, because you've talked about it. And hopefully today's interview has done that for you. Also, I want to give a big shout out to the sponsors of the podcast, Richer Sounds and Folio Society. Without those guys, I wouldn't be able to do this podcast, so a massive thanks to those guys. And if you're listening right now, please take the time to like any of the updates you see on Twitter or Facebook, share them on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or please, if you can, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And the most important thing is I do have a Patreon account. Each and every month on there, I upload exclusive episodes for you guys at home. I give you a welcome pack. I try and give a newsletter each and every month when I can. I give you updates before anyone else. And honestly, all the money that goes in on Patreon goes right back into the podcast. And there's a link on markandme.com if you want to sign up on there. But it's really, really appreciated. I'll be back in only a couple of days' time with another brand new episode and another YouTube video as well. So I can't wait to share them with you. So until then, look after yourself, take care, and I'll speak to you all very soon.
I seen a hand, I seen a vision. It was reaching through the clouds to risk a dream. A shadow crossed the sky and it crushed it to the ground just like a beast. The old man's back again. The old man's back again. I seen a woman standing in the snow. She was silent as she watched them take her man. Teardrops burned her cheeks, for she thought she'd heard the shadow had left this land. The old man's back again. The old man's back again. The crowds just gathered, their faces turned away, and they queue all day like dragons of disgust. Older women whispering, wondering just what these young hotheads want of us. And Andre V, he cries, with eyes that ring like chimes. His anti-worlds go spinning through his head. He burns them in his dreams, for half awake they may as well be dead. The old man's back again. I see he's back again. I see a soldier, he's standing in the rain. For him there's no old man to walk behind. Devoured by his pain, bewildered by the faces who pass him by. He'd like another name, the one he's got's a curse. These people cry. Why can't they understand? His mother called him Ivan, then she died. The old man